Some roads exist for a reason. Others exist because people stopped using them. Tonight, you'll hear 10 real horror stories from American backroads, places where help is far away and mistakes linger. Story 1. Road that wasn't T on the map. I should have known something was wrong when my GPS went dead the moment I turned onto that road. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in late October, and I was driving through the empty backroads of eastern Nevada, trying to make it to Reno before sunrise. The highway had been under construction for miles, forcing me onto detours that kept spiraling farther away from civilization. That is when I saw it, a narrow paved road cutting through the darkness between two massive rock formations. No signs, no markers, just smooth black asphalt that looked newer than anything I'd seen in the last 100 miles. My phone showed nothing. The GPS flickered once, then displayed only static gray pixels where the map should have been. But the road was real. I could see it right there in my headlights, and according to my sense of direction, it headed straight toward where I needed to go. A shortcut. Maybe I'd save an hour, maybe more. The highway construction had already cost me 3 hours of sleep I couldn't afford to lose. I made the turn. The first thing I noticed was the silence. My radio cut to white noise the second my tires crossed onto that road. Then the white noise died too, leaving nothing but the hum of my engine and the sound of rubber on pavement. The rock formations on either side grew taller as I drove deeper, their shadows swallowing my headlight beams like they were hungry for the light. The darkness here felt thicker somehow, more substantial, as if it had weight and texture. I'd been driving for maybe 10 minutes when I realized I hadn't seen a single road sign. No mile markers, no speed limits, nothing to indicate this road was maintained by any state or county. The pavement remained perfect though, almost unnaturally smooth, without a single crack or pothole. It unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. Roads don't stay this pristine in the desert. Weather and time destroy everything out here. That is when the fear started creeping in, subtle and cold, like fingers tracing the back of my neck. I tried my phone again. Still dead, not just no signal, completely unresponsive, as if the battery had been drained despite showing 70% charge before I made the turn. I pressed the power button repeatedly. Nothing. The screen stayed black as the sky above me. The rock walls on both sides began to change. Strange shapes emerged from the stone, patterns that looked almost deliberate, almost like symbols carved by human hands, but worn smooth by centuries of wind and sand. Or maybe my mind was playing tricks in the darkness, finding meaning in random erosion. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But the shadows between those rocks seemed to move independently of my headlights. I'd been on this road for 30 minutes now, and that was impossible. A shortcut shouldn't take this long. I should have intersected with another highway or reached some kind of landmark. Instead, the road just continued, straight and perfect, cutting through terrain that grew increasingly unfamiliar. The desert here looked wrong. The vegetation seemed twisted, growing in directions that defied the wind patterns. Even the sand appeared darker, almost black in places, like it had been scorched by some ancient fire. A horrifying thought crossed my mind. What if this road doesn't go anywhere? What if it just keeps going forever, swallowing travelers who make the mistake of thinking they found a shortcut? I considered turning around. My hands actually gripped the steering wheel tighter, ready to brake and reverse. But something stopped me. Not logic or reason, something deeper and more disturbing. The feeling that turning back might be worse than pressing forward. That the road behind me might not be the same road I entered. That the darkness in my rearview mirror concealed something patient and watchful, waiting for me to try to escape. So I kept driving. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath fogging in the cabin despite the heater running full blast. Frost began forming on the inside of my windows, delicate crystalline patterns that shouldn't exist in the Nevada desert in October. I cranked the defroster, but the ice only spread, creeping across the glass like living fingers reaching for something. Then I saw the first structure. A building materialized from the darkness on the right side of the road. Single-story, flat roof, walls made of cinder block painted a faded yellow that looked gray in my headlights. No windows, just one metal door and a parking lot with fresh white lines painted on cracked asphalt. A wooden sign hung from a rusted post, swinging slightly despite the complete absence of wind. The words were barely visible, hand-painted in uneven letters. Last stop diner. No cars in the parking lot. No lights inside, but I could see the door was slightly open, just a crack of deeper shadow beyond the frame. And I swear I saw movement in that shadow. Something shifting position, withdrawing further into the darkness as my headlights swept across the building. My foot eased off the gas without me consciously deciding to slow down. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to investigate, to find another human being in this increasingly nightmarish landscape. But a deeper, more primal part of my brain recognized danger. The kind of danger that predators use to lure prey. The anglerfish, this light in the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. I pressed the accelerator and kept driving. The diner vanished behind me, swallowed instantly by the absolute darkness that seemed to devour everything more than 20 feet from my vehicle. I checked the rearview mirror compulsively, terrified I'd see lights flickering on inside that building. Or worse, see the doors swing fully open to release whatever had been watching me from within. The road began to curve for the first time, gentle sweeping turns that made me realize how unnaturally straight it had been before. The rock formations fell away, replaced by flat, empty desert on both sides. But this emptiness felt worse than the confining walls of stone. Out here, the darkness stretched forever in all directions, and I had the creeping sensation that I was being observed by countless unseen eyes hidden in that vast nothing. More structures appeared, a gas station with ancient pumps that looked like they belonged in a 1950s photograph. The price display showing 99 cents per gallon in mechanical flip numbers. A small church with a steeple that leaned at an impossible angle, defying gravity and structural logic. A motel with a neon vacancy sign that flickered erratically despite having no visible power source, casting brief red flashes across rooms with doors that hung open like screaming mouths. None of these buildings showed any signs of recent use, yet all of them felt occupied. Not by people, by something else. Something that had claimed these forgotten structures as its own territory, transforming them into hunting grounds for travelers stupid enough to take shortcuts through places that weren't supposed to exist. I'd been driving for over an hour now. My gas gauge showed 3/4 full, which was wrong. I should have burned at least a quarter tank by now. Time felt elastic here, stretching and compressing in ways that made my skin crawl. Was I moving forward at all, or was I trapped in some kind of loop, driving the same section of road endlessly while the scenery changed around me like stage props in a theater designed by something inhuman? Then my headlights caught something in the middle of the road, a figure, standing perfectly still, facing away from me. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly on the perfect pavement before stopping about 50 feet from the figure. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they might crack. The figure didn't move, didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. It wore clothes, jeans and a jacket that looked normal enough from behind, but something about its proportions seemed wrong. The arms hung too long, the head sat at a strange angle, and it remained absolutely motionless with an inhuman stillness that no living person could maintain. I honked my horn. The sound died instantly, absorbed by the darkness before it could travel more than a few feet. The figure didn't react. I honked again, longer this time, but the silence swallowed the noise just as quickly. My hand moved to the gear shift, ready to reverse, ready to flee back down the road despite my earlier fears. But before I could shift, the figure moved. Not like a person turning around. It rotated mechanically, pivoting on one foot like a mannequin on a turntable, until it faced my direction. I couldn't see its face. My headlights should have illuminated every detail, but where the face should have been, there was only shadow. Deep, absolute shadow that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The kind of darkness that exists in places where light has never reached and never will. Then it started walking toward me. Not running, walking with slow, deliberate steps that ate up the distance between us faster than should have been possible. Each step covered more ground than the last, as if the road itself was contracting, bringing the figure closer with terrifying inevitability. I threw the car into reverse and floored the accelerator. The engine screamed, the tires spun, but I wasn't moving backward. The car stayed locked in place, vibrating with the effort of the spinning wheels but remaining perfectly stationary as if held by invisible hands. The figure kept coming, closer now, close enough that I could see its arms weren't just long. They were wrong, bent at too many joints, ending in fingers that were too numerous and too thin, like spider legs pretending to be human hands. I shifted into drive and punched the gas. The car lurched forward, straight toward the figure. At the last second, I swerved hard to the left, my tires leaving the pavement and hitting the desert sand. The car fishtailed wildly. I fought with the steering wheel, somehow keeping control as I carved a wide arc around the figure and back onto the road beyond it. In my rearview mirror, I watched it standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still once again, slowly rotating back to its original position as if nothing had happened. I drove faster than I should have, my speedometer climbing past 80, then 90. The road remained perfect, allowing the speed, almost encouraging it. My hands shook on the wheel, my breath came in ragged gasps, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was still somehow right behind me, matching my speed effortlessly, patiently waiting for me to make another mistake. The road began to climb, rising into hills I hadn't seen before. The terrain grew rockier, more mountainous. And then, suddenly, impossibly, I saw lights ahead. Real lights. The orange glow of sodium vapor street lamps. The white and red streams of moving traffic. The highway. The actual highway I'd been trying to reach. I burst onto it like a drowning man breaking the surface of water, my car merging recklessly into the right lane as a semi-truck blasted its horn and swerved around me. Normal traffic. Normal sounds. The radio suddenly crackled back to life, playing some country song about lost love and whiskey. My phone screen lit up, displaying the time and a full grid of signal bars. 4:17 in the morning. I'd been on that road for over an hour, but according to my phone, only 11 minutes had passed since I made the turn. I pulled onto the shoulder, hands still trembling, and looked back at where I emerged. There was no road there, just a guardrail and beyond it, a steep rocky slope that no vehicle could have climbed. No intersection, no turnoff, nothing. I opened my Maps application with shaking fingers and zoomed in on my location. The highway showed clearly, running exactly where it should, but there was no side road, no shortcut. The area I'd just driven through for over an hour appeared on the map as solid terrain, marked as federal wilderness land with no roads whatsoever. I sat there on the shoulder for 20 minutes, watching the normal traffic pass, letting the ordinary world convince me I was safe. Eventually, I pulled back onto the highway and continued toward Reno. I made it before dawn, checked into a motel, and slept for 12 hours straight. That was 3 months ago. I'd driven past that area twice since then, once during the day and once at night. In daylight, there is nothing but rocks and sand and the highway construction that originally forced me to detour. At night, with the right angle and the right shadows, I can almost see it. A gap between the rocks, a hint of smooth pavement, the suggestion of a road that I ascend to on any map. I want to turn onto it again, but sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty places, I wonder about that diner, about those other buildings, about the figure standing in the road, and I wonder how many other shortcuts exist out there, cutting through spaces that weren't meant to be traveled, leading to destinations that can be found on any map. Places that are hungry, patient, waiting for the next driver who thinks they found a faster way home. Story 2. Empty Mile. I am going to tell you something that happened to me 3 years ago on a stretch of highway in Nebraska that most people don't even know exists. Something that changed the way I understand fear itself. Something terrifying that I've never fully explained to anyone until now. And I'm only sharing it because I need someone else to know the truth about that place. Before I start, I need you to understand one crucial thing. What I am about to describe happened exactly as I am telling it. Every horrifying detail is real. My name is Michael, and I was driving home from Denver to visit my dying mother in Omaha. It was late October, around 11 at night, and I made a serious mistake. I took what I thought was a shortcut on Route 54, a 2-lane highway that cuts through the Nebraska darkness like a scar across skin. The unsettling reality of that decision would become painfully clear within the hour. The first sign of something wrong came immediately. The road was completely empty, not just quiet, eerie in a way that felt intentional, as if the darkness itself was watching me. I passed a faded road sign that read, "No one uses this route at night." Not a warning, a fact, just those words, weathered and honest, staring at me from the side of the road. My stomach tightened. Locals avoided this road after dark for a reason. The silence felt unnatural, and I quickly realized that turning around wasn't as easy as expected. There were no exits, no side roads, nothing but endless highways stretching in both directions like a terrifying throat swallowing me whole. My headlights cut through the blackness, illuminating nothing but asphalt and the occasional scrub brush. The fear was setting in now, a creeping paranoia that something was deeply wrong. I'd been driving for maybe 15 minutes when I noticed the first thing that made my blood run cold. There was another car ahead of me, maybe a mile away, its taillights creating two tiny red dots in the distance. I should have felt relief seeing another vehicle. Instead, I felt nothing but dread. Something about those lights didn't feel right. They were moving strangely, weaving slightly as if the driver was drowsy or drunk. I pressed the accelerator, wanting to close the distance, wanting to see if I could get a look at the car. But something stopped me. A terrible instinct whispered that approaching was a mistake, that whatever was driving that vehicle ahead was something I should keep my distance from. The chilling thought crept into my mind that maybe that is what they were counting on. Maybe the driver wanted me to stay back. The highway continued on, mile after mile, and I couldn't escape the terrifying realization that this road had no ending. The darkness was absolute, the kind of darkness you'd experience in cities, the kind that presses against your windows like something alive. My phone had no signal. The radio picked up nothing but static, as if the electromagnetic world had abandoned me. I was completely isolated, alone with my racing thoughts and the growing horror that I had made a catastrophic mistake taking this road. That is when I saw the first body. It was on the shoulder of the road, illuminated briefly by my headlights as I passed. A figure lying face down in the dirt, wearing what looked like a dark coat. The sight was so shocking, so utterly disturbing, that I actually jerked the wheel. My car swerved slightly before I regained control. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I immediately grabbed my phone and tried to call 911, but there was still no signal. The terrifying reality was that I was alone with whatever had created that body. I kept driving, unable to stop, unable to turn around. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The fear was becoming overwhelming, drowning out every rational thought. Had that really been a person? Could it have been something else? My mind was racing through possible explanations. And then, maybe 2 miles further, I saw another body. This one was in the middle of the road. I had to swerve to avoid it. A figure in pale clothing, arms outstretched as if it had been reaching for something when it died. The horrifying sight burned into my memory, and I forced myself to keep driving, my foot pressing harder on the gas. The chilling certainty was settling in that this wasn't random. These bodies weren't accidents. This was something deliberate, something nightmare-like that had been placed there intentionally. My mouth had gone completely dry. Fear was making it hard to breathe. I was hyperventilating now, my hands gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles had turned white. The dark landscape outside my window seemed to pulse with malevolence. Every shadow felt like something watching. Every sound my car made seemed too loud, too intrusive. I felt like an intruder in a place that didn't want me here, a place that was actively hostile to my existence. Then I saw something that made everything worse. It was a car parked on the shoulder, just sitting there in the darkness. As I got closer, I could make out that the driver, his side door was hanging open. The interior light was on, creating an eerie glow against the night. And inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was a person. Unsettling and wrong in a way I couldn't quite define. I drove past it slowly, forcing myself to look away. The terrifying question screamed in my mind. What had happened to all these people? The highway seemed to extend forever. I'd been driving for nearly an hour now, and there was no sign of civilization, no signs indicating how much further this road extended. The horrifying reality was sinking in that I might be trapped here, that the darkness surrounding me might be infinite, that whatever had happened to those bodies might happen to me. The fear was becoming a physical thing, a weight on my chest that made each breath a struggle. I passed a mile marker. It read 47. I had no idea if this was progress towards somewhere or just a meaningless number in the darkness. The chilling thought occurred to me that maybe the markers were counting down. Maybe we were getting closer to something. The idea was insane, but my terrified mind couldn't let it go. That is when I saw them. On the road ahead, silhouettes, dozens of them, figures standing in the darkness, motionless, spread across the highway. Not a roadblock, not an accident scene, just people standing there in the middle of the night, wearing dark clothes, their backs to the road. The unsettling image would have been funny if it wasn't so completely horrifying. I was seeing something that made no sense, something that violated every law of reason. My terror spiked. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the car steady. I pressed my foot down harder on the accelerator. The car shot forward, racing toward those figures. Every instinct screamed at me that stopping was death. That whatever these people were, whatever they represented, encountering them would be the worst mistake I could make. The terrifying reality was that I didn't know if they were human at all. The way they stood, perfectly still, perfectly silent, was wrong in a way that felt primordial. It felt evil. As I got closer, I realized they were lining the road. Hundreds of them, stretched out for what seemed like miles, standing perfectly still, not moving, not reacting to my approaching car. The horrifying scene was like something from a nightmare, the kind of image that would stay with you forever. The fear was so intense now that I felt like I was drowning in it. I was screaming, actually screaming. My voice was raw and desperate as I pressed the accelerator to the floor. I didn't slow down. I drove right through them. There was no impact, no bodies hitting my car, no sound at all. When I looked in my rearview mirror, they were still standing there, motionless, as if I had never passed through them at all. The eerie realization hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't moved. They hadn't reacted. They were still facing away from the road, their forms shadowy and wrong. And then my mirror went dark. Something had blocked the view behind me. That's when I understood. The terrifying truth that had been building in my mind finally crystallized. I wasn't driving through that place. I was driving deeper into it. The darkness wasn't just absence of light. It was presence, something thick and real that was moving closer to me. I could feel it. The chilling sensation was like ice water running down my spine. Something was hunting me, something that had arranged those bodies, those people, those figures, as a kind of trail, leading me deeper. My rational mind was shutting down. Fear had taken over completely. I was doing one thing and one thing only, trying to escape. The horrifying landscape outside my windows was becoming unstable. The road seemed to bend in ways that shouldn't be possible. My headlights were reflecting off nothing. The darkness was deepening, becoming almost purple, almost alive. The fear was suffocating now. I couldn't breathe properly. I was making sounds I didn't recognize, animal sounds of pure terror. Then the road ended. Not at a stop sign, not at a T intersection. The asphalt simply ceased to exist. In front of me was nothing but darkness, a cliff face of night that my headlights couldn't penetrate. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, tires screaming against the pavement. I came to a stop maybe 10 feet from where the road ended, my engine still running, my headlights illuminating nothing. The silence was absolute, the terrifying kind of silence that belongs to places where no living thing exists. I sat there for a long time, unable to move, unable to think. The horror had reached a point where my mind couldn't process it anymore. I was numb, empty, a shell of a person trapped in a car at the edge of nothing. And then I heard it, a sound coming from the darkness ahead, a sound like breathing, long, slow, wet breathing. The chilling realization that something was just beyond the reach of my headlights. Something large, something aware of my presence. The unsettling knowledge that the darkness had a shape, had substance, had intent. It was breathing, waiting, watching me. I shifted into reverse and backed away. The tires squealed against the asphalt. The darkness seemed to follow, pressing against the edges of my headlight beams, shrinking the circle of light around my car. The fear was primal now, pure survival instinct overriding everything else. I was backing up at increasing speed, the road stretching behind me, and all I could see in the darkness were those motionless figures standing along the shoulder, watching my retreat. Mile after mile I backed up. The fear kept me moving, kept my foot pressed to the gas pedal. You know how long I drove in reverse, but eventually, I saw something that changed everything. A light, not a reflection, not my own headlights, a real light ahead, to my left. The unsettling realization that this might be a trap, that the darkness was more clever than I thought, barely registered. I didn't care. The terror had exhausted me. I needed light. I needed anything that wasn't this darkness. I spun the car around and drove toward the light. It was a gas station. Just a single pump standing alone in the darkness, a small building behind it. The horrifying question immediately surfaced. How was this here? How had I not passed it coming this way? The fear whispered that I hadn't passed it because it hadn't existed yet. That it was only here now, created specifically for this moment, created specifically for me. I pulled up to the pump and sat in the car, breathing hard, trying to think clearly. The light above the pump cast everything in harsh white, and suddenly the darkness beyond seemed even more terrifying by contrast. The eerie feeling that something was waiting just beyond the light, this reach, was overwhelming. I could see my face in the rearview mirror. I looked like a ghost, eyes wide and bloodshot, skin pale, hair matted with sweat, the face of someone who had glimpsed something that shouldn't exist. I got out of the car on shaking legs and walked toward the building. The terrifying silence was broken only by my footsteps. The door was unlocked. Inside was a single room with shelves of products, but nothing was quite right. The items on the shelves had no labels. The cash register was empty. The floor was impossibly clean, and standing behind the counter was a man, or something that looked like a man. The chilling detail that didn't fit was his eyes. They didn't blink. They just stared at me with an unsettling intensity that made my skin crawl. His mouth didn't move. He didn't breathe. The horrifying understanding that I was looking at something dead, something preserved in a parody of life, crashed over me. I couldn't look at him anymore. I turned and ran back to my car. I drove. I didn't remember anything about the drive except the overwhelming terror and the crushing need to get away. The darkness kept coming, kept pressing, but somehow the road eventually delivered me to civilization. A truck stop, real lights, real people. The horrifying moment when I realized I'd been on that road for nearly 8 hours, not one. My phone showed messages from earlier that day that I couldn't remember receiving. The terrifying sensation that I lost entire hours of my life to that place was suffocating. I never went back to find that gas station. I never reported what I saw on that highway. The fear of not being believed was nothing compared to the fear of being believed and having to explain what that place really was. The unsettling truth is that I still don't understand it. Every night, I think about that road, that darkness, that breathing sound beyond my headlights. The chilling question never stops. What was it doing there? What was it waiting for? And the most terrifying question of all, is it still waiting? They say no one uses Route 54 at night anymore. The locals know better than to drive there after dark. If you ever in Nebraska, if you ever see that road sign, I want you to remember everything I told you. The horrifying truth about that place is that it's real. It exists. And if you ever find yourself on that empty highway in the darkness, pressing down that accelerator with your heart in your throat, knowing that something terrible is reaching for you from the shadows, knowing that there is no escape, no help, no salvation from whatever hungers in that eternal night, you understand why no one uses this road after dark. You understand because you be trapped there too. And whatever waits in that darkness will be waiting for you as well. Story 3. Gas station between towns. I should have kept driving. This is what I tell myself now, lying awake at night, staring at shadows that seem just a little too dark. But when you alone on Highway 50 at 3 in the morning with a gas gauge touching empty and not a single light visible in any direction, you have many choices. The terrifying thing about isolation is how quickly it strips away your illusions of control. The gas station appeared suddenly, breaking through the darkness like something that shouldn't exist. No signs warned me it was coming. No distant glow promised civilization ahead. One moment there was nothing but endless Nevada desert, and the next moment, there it was. A single building standing in an ocean of black, its fluorescent lights humming with an intensity that felt almost aggressive against the surrounding void. Something felt wrong immediately. I can explain what triggers that primal warning system we all have buried deep in our brains, but every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep driving. The horrifying realization was that I couldn't. My fuel light had been on for 20 miles, and the next town was another 40 miles east. This wasn't a choice. It was a trap I'd driven myself into. I pulled up to the pumps and cut the engine. The silence that followed was absolute and unsettling. No wind, no distant highway sounds, no insects clicking in the desert night, just the mechanical hum of those lights overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the shadows seem darker by contrast. The building itself looked like it had been abandoned decades ago and then suddenly brought back to life. Peeling paint revealed layers of different colors underneath, like archaeological evidence of multiple failed businesses. The windows were grimy, but light spilled through them, illuminating a small convenience store interior that looked frozen in time somewhere around 1987. I stepped out of my car, and the heat hit me like a physical wall despite the late hour. Desert nights are supposed to be cold, but this air felt thick and warm, almost alive with a presence I couldn't name. The fear of the unknown crawled up my spine as I approached the pump. That's when I noticed the other cars. 3 of them sat in the parking spaces near the building. A rusted pickup truck with Montana plates. A newer sedan that looked out of place, expensive, with California registration. And a minivan with a child's car seat visible through the rear window. All empty, all silent, all covered in a thin layer of dust that suggested they'd been sitting here longer than a quick bathroom break would explain. The chilling detail that made my stomach drop was the keys. I could see them hanging in the ignition of the pickup truck, glinting in the harsh light. Nobody leaves their keys in the ignition at a deserted gas station in the middle of nowhere. Nobody. I tried the pump. It didn't work. No card reader, no mechanical click when I lifted the nozzle. Dead. But the lights were on. The building was clearly operational. Someone had to be inside. The creepy atmosphere intensified as I walked toward the entrance. Through the dirty windows, I could see shelves stocked with products, a counter with an old-fashioned register, and fluorescent lights flickering with an irregular rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. But I couldn't see anyone inside. The door opened with an electronic beep that sounded too loud, too cheerful, completely wrong for this haunted place. Cool air rushed out, carrying a smell that made my throat tighten. It wasn't rotten. It was something worse, something antiseptic and chemical, like a hospital, but underneath it lurked something organic and disturbing that my mind refused to identify. Hello, my voice echoed in the empty store. The interior was a nightmare of normalcy. Aisles of chips and candy, a coffee machine still brewing, magazines in a rack showing covers from this year. Everything looked functional and recently maintained, but there was no one there. The register sat unmanned. A half-eaten sandwich lay on the counter beside a can of Coke, still cold enough that condensation dripped down its sides. Someone had been here moments ago. I need gas, I called out, my fear making my voice sound strange and hollow. The pump's aren't working. Silence answered me. That terrible, heavy silence that feels like it was listening. I moved deeper into the store, past aisles of familiar products that suddenly looked wrong in this context. Everything was slightly off. The Coca-Cola logo faced the wrong direction. The candy bars had wrappers I didn't recognize despite looking almost right. Small details that accumulated into a creeping sense of unreality. Behind the counter, a door stood slightly ajar, revealing darkness beyond. A handwritten sign hung on it, employee only. Do not enter. But something about that darkness called to me with a pull I couldn't explain. The horrifying compulsion to look, to understand, overpowered my better judgment. I pushed the door open. The back room stretched far deeper than the building its exterior suggested was possible. Shadows pooled in corners that geometry said shouldn't exist. The chemical smell intensified, mixed now with something else. Copper, blood, and underneath it all, something ancient and rotten that made my primitive brain scream danger. Then I saw the photographs, hundreds of them pinned to the walls in neat rows. Polaroids, all identical in composition. People standing in front of the gas station, posed like tourists at a landmark. Men, women, children, all smiling, all looking directly at the camera with expressions that were almost right but contained something empty and terrifying in the eyes. I recognized the Montana pickup truck in the background of one photo, the California sedan in another, the minivan with the child seat visible in a third. All the vehicles sitting outside right now, empty and abandoned. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal, but the phone, its flashlight worked, and as I swept it across the room, I saw what waited in the far corner. A camera sat on a tripod, pointed at a mark on the floor. An X made from duct tape, positioned exactly where someone would stand to have their picture taken in front of the gas station through the back window. The nightmare clarity of understanding hit me all at once. This wasn't a gas station. It was a collection point. A trap that had been here for decades, maybe longer, gathering people who were alone and desperate and stupid enough to stop. I ran. Pure terror drove my legs as I burst back through the employee door into the main store. But the layout had changed. Aisles stretched in impossible directions. The front entrance wasn't to where it should have been. The fluorescent lights flickered faster now, their rhythm matching my racing heartbeat. Then I heard footsteps above me, not from another room, from directly above, where there shouldn't to have been a second floor. Slow, deliberate footsteps that crossed the ceiling, following my movement through the store. Something was tracking me, something that had been waiting patiently while I explored, giving me enough time to understand before it revealed itself. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything except the faint glow from my phone screen. In that small circle of light, I saw them. Figures standing at the end of each aisle, motionless, watching. The people from the photographs, still smiling, still wearing the same clothes they'd worn in pictures taken years, maybe decades ago. Their eyes reflected my phone, this light like animals. They didn't to move. They didn't to speak. They just stood there, blocking every path. Their presence more terrifying than any monster could have been because they had been human once. They had stood where I stood, felt what I felt, and something had transformed them into whatever they were now. The footsteps above stopped. Something was descending the stairs I couldn't see in the darkness. Each step creaked with a weight that felt immense and ancient. This was what waited at the center of the trap. This was what all those people had met. I don't remember exactly how I escaped. The memory fragments into pieces, like my mind protecting itself from something it couldn't to process. Running through darkness that felt solid and resistant. Hands that brushed against me without quite touching. A door that opened onto the desert night. My car starting despite every expectation that it wouldn't. I drove for hours on fumes that should have run out after the first 20 miles, my gauge still showing empty but the engine somehow running. As dawn broke over the mountains, the horrifying realization settled over me that I didn't know if I actually escaped or if this was part of the trap too. When I finally reached a real town, I filled my tank at a crowded gas station surrounded by people in daylight and normalcy. But as I went inside to pay, I saw it, pinned to a bulletin board among flyers for lost pets and community events. A photograph of a gas station standing alone in the desert night. The same gas station. Underneath it, a handwritten note. Avoid. Multiple disappearances reported. Last known location of 17 missing travelers since 1983. My hands trembled as I read the list of names below. At the bottom, someone had added a new entry in fresh ink, dated 3 days from now. My name. The terrifying truth is that I don't know if I left that place or if I'm still there. Sometimes at night I hear footsteps above me where there is no second floor. Sometimes I catch my reflection smiling when I'm not. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone on empty highways, I see it in the distance. That single gas station, standing between miles of nothing, its lights humming with patient hunger. It was waiting for me to come back. Or maybe I never left at all. Story 4. Highway that follows you back. I still check my rearview mirror every 30 seconds. It has been 3 months since that night on Route 44, and I cannot stop looking behind me. The doctors call it anxiety. My wife calls it obsession, but they did not see what I saw on that empty stretch of Nevada highway. They did not feel what followed me home. It started with a simple mistake. I took the wrong exit. I was driving back from a sales conference in Reno, exhausted from 3 days of forced networking and cheap hotel coffee. The plan was straightforward. Take Interstate 80 East, stop somewhere near Elko, get a few hours of sleep, then push through to Salt Lake City by morning. I had driven this route a dozen times. I could do it with my eyes closed. That was my first mistake. Thinking I knew where I was going. Around midnight, somewhere past Fernley, I saw what looked like my exit. The sign was weathered, barely visible in the wash of my headlights. Route 44 South. I did not remember a Route 44, but exhaustion makes you stupid. Makes you trust things you should not trust. I took the turn without thinking. The road narrowed immediately. The smooth interstate asphalt gave way to cracked pavement that thumped under my tires in an irregular rhythm. Streetlights disappeared. The only illumination came from my high beams cutting through an oppressive darkness that seemed thicker than normal night. Denser. Like it had weight. I checked my GPS. No signal. The screen showed my car as a blue dot suspended in gray nothing. No roads, no landmarks, just emptiness. My phone showed the same. One bar, then none. The smart thing would have been to turn around right then. But the road was narrow, bordered on both sides by desert scrub that stretched into infinite blackness. No shoulder, no turnaround. Just keep going forward, I told myself. It has to connect to something eventually. That is when I first noticed the headlights behind me. They appeared suddenly in my rearview mirror, maybe half a mile back. 2 pale yellow orbs that seemed to float in the darkness. Relief washed through me. Another driver meant I was not completely lost. This road went somewhere if someone else was using it. I watched those lights in my mirror as I drove. They maintained the same distance, never getting closer, never falling behind. Always there, always watching. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The road continued straight, no curves, no intersections, just an endless corridor through nothing. The headlights behind me never wavered. I slowed down, expecting them to catch up or pass. My speedometer dropped from 60 to 50 to 40. The lights behind me slowed too, maintaining that exact same distance. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Something felt wrong, felt calculated. I sped up, 65, 70, pushing my sedan harder than I should on an unfamiliar road. The lights behind me accelerated too, matching my speed perfectly, maintaining that fixed distance like we were connected by an invisible tether. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the air conditioning blasting cold air across my face. This was not normal driving behavior. No one matches another car. A speed that precisely, not naturally, the smart thing would have been to stop. Force a confrontation, make them pass or make them stop. But some primal part of my brain screamed against it. Every instinct told me that stopping would be worse. That whatever was behind those lights wanted me to stop. So I kept driving. The road began to change. Subtle at first. A slight curve here, a gentle rise there. The scrubland on either side gave way to rockier terrain. Shadows of distant mesas loomed against the star-filled sky. But the lights behind me never changed position. Never wavered, like they were not following the road at all. Like they were following me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just another tired driver using my taillights as a guide. Maybe they were as lost as I was. Maybe, but then I passed a mile marker, number 76. 3 minutes later, I passed another one, also number 76. My breath caught in my throat. That was impossible. Mile markers do not repeat. They mark distance, progression, forward movement. But I had just driven 3 miles and covered 0 distance. The lights behind me grew brighter. Panic set in then, real and cold and absolute. Something was very wrong with this road, with this night, with whatever was behind me. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. The engine roared, 80 miles per hour, 85. The car shook. The steering wheel vibrated in my hands. But the lights behind me stayed fixed in my mirror, unchanging, unwavering, impossible. Then I saw something ahead. A structure, dark and low and stretched across the road like a mouth. A tunnel. I had not seen a tunnel on any Nevada highway before. The landscape was wrong for it. Too flat, too open. But there it was, a black opening carved into nothing, growing larger as I rushed toward it. Every fiber of my being screamed not to enter it. But the lights behind me were brighter now, closer, and there was nowhere else to go. I plunged into the darkness. The tunnel swallowed my headlights. The beams that had stretched hundreds of feet across the desert suddenly compressed to mere yards. The walls were close, too close, rough stone that seemed to pulse in my peripheral vision. The air pressure changed. My ears popped. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath, and the lights behind me vanished. Total darkness in my rearview mirror. Nothing. For the first time in 30 minutes, I was alone. The relief was overwhelming and terrifying all at once. Where did they go? What were they? The tunnel curved, gently at first, then sharper. My headlights swept across the walls and I saw markings. Scratches. Long, deliberate gouges in the stone as if something massive had dragged itself along the walls. Some of the scratches were fresh. I could see where rock dust still clung to them. The tunnel began to narrow. My side mirrors nearly touched the walls. The road declined steeply. I was going down, deep, deeper than any road should go. The air grew thick and hard to breathe. My car, its engine sounded wrong, muffled, like I was driving underwater. Then I emerged. The tunnel opened onto a vast space. Not outside, still underground. A massive cavern lit by a sickly orange glow that came from no visible source. And the road continued, suspended on a narrow bridge over emptiness so deep and dark it hurt to look at. But that was not the worst part. There were cars, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, scattered across the cavern floor far below, crushed and twisted and piled like a junkyard. Some looked decades old, others were new. I saw a Tesla among them, its distinctive silhouette unmistakable even from that height, and they all had their headlights on. Hundreds of pale yellow orbs staring up from the darkness below. Watching, waiting, my foot found the brake. The car skidded, tires screamed. For a horrifying moment I thought I would slide right off the bridge into that pit of watching lights. But I stopped, inches from the edge, engine idling, heart hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Then behind me, back in the tunnel, this mouth, The headlights appeared again. But not 2 lights. Dozens. Filling the tunnel. Advancing slowly. And I understood with sick certainty that they were not cars. Had never been cars. They were something else wearing the shape of headlights the way a predator wears camouflage. The bridge ahead stretched across the cavern toward another tunnel on the far side. Maybe 200 yards. It was narrow, barely wider than my car. No guardrails. Nothing between me and the drop. The lights behind me crept forward. I had 2 choices. Go forward across that impossible bridge or go backward into whatever was pretending to be headlights. I chose forward. I accelerated slowly, carefully. The bridge's surface was rough and uneven. My car bounced and swayed. The abyss yawned on both sides. The lights below seemed to brighten as I passed over them, tracking my movement. Above me, the cavern ceiling was lost in shadow, but I could hear something up there. Movement, breathing, the sound of vast things shifting in darkness. Halfway across the bridge, my engine sputtered. No, God, no, not here, not now. The car coughed and died. Momentum carried me a few more feet. Then nothing. Silence except for the ticking of cooling metal and that breathing sound from above. I turned the key. The starter clicked uselessly. Again. Nothing. The dashboard lights flickered and went dark. My headlights dimmed to almost nothing. In my rearview mirror, the pursuing lights had stopped at the bridge's entrance. They waited there, patient, like they knew. Then my headlights went out completely. Absolute darkness closed around me. The kind of dark that exists underground. The kind that has never known sunlight. I could not see my own hands on the steering wheel. Could not see the dash. Could not see anything. But I could hear. Something large scraped against stone far above. Then something else answered from below. A sound like metal dragging across metal, but organic. Wet. The lights from the crashed cars began to go out one by one. Click, click, click. Methodical, deliberate. Like something was moving among them, switching them off. My hand found the door handle. Some stupid part of my brain thought about running. But running where? The bridge was maybe 3 feet wider than my car. In total darkness. One wrong step and I would fall into that pit of extinct headlights and join the others. Then my car's interior dome light flickered on. The weak yellow glow illuminated my terrified face in the rearview mirror. And behind my reflection, in the back seat, I saw eyes. Not human eyes. Too large. Too many. They reflected the dome light like an animal, whose eyes caught in headlights. But there were 6 of them arranged in 2 vertical rows. And they were looking right at me. The light went out. Darkness again. But now I knew I was not alone in the car. Something had been in the back seat this entire time. Had been there since the tunnel. Maybe since I first saw those falling lights on Route 44. I felt breath on the back of my neck. Cold and wrong and smelling like rust and earth. A sound came from behind me. Not words. Nothing that could be called language. But somehow I understood its meaning. Drive. The engine roared to life. My headlights blazed so bright they hurt. Pure white instead of yellow, illuminating the bridge ahead in stark clarity. And beyond it, the second tunnel. This opening. I did not question it. Did not think. I drove. The car accelerated impossibly fast. The bridge flashed beneath me. The tunnel opening rushed forward. Behind me, the pursuing lights erupted in fury. Surging forward, but too late. I plunged into the second tunnel. This one climbed, steep and winding. My speedometer showed impossible speeds. 90, 100, 120. But it felt like standing still. Like reality itself was stretching. The tunnel walls blurred. Time felt wrong. Then I shot out into the night. Normal night. Desert night. Stars overhead. Scrubland on both sides. And ahead, a familiar green sign. Interstate 80. 2 miles. I merged onto the highway in a daze. Traffic flowed normally. A semi-truck passed me. A family in an SUV. Everything was normal. Impossibly, terrifyingly normal. I pulled into the first rest stop I found and sat in the parking lot until dawn. Lights on. Doors locked. Watching my mirrors. When the sun came up, I checked the back seat. Empty. I checked under the seats. In the trunk. Nothing. But on the back of my driver's seat headrest, I found 3 long scratches in the fabric. Deep gouges that went through to the foam. Like something had gripped it. Hard. I drove straight home. Did not stop except for gas. Barely slept. When I finally walked through my front door 30 hours later, my wife hugged me and asked why I was so pale. Why I looked like I had seen a ghost. I told her I took a wrong turn. Got lost. It was nothing. But it was not nothing. Because 3 months later, I still check my mirrors. And sometimes, late at night when I am driving home from work on familiar roads, I see lights behind me that maintain the exact same distance. Lights that do not belong to any car I can identify. And the road feels wrong. The street signs repeat. Mile markers go backward. And I know that something followed me out of that tunnel. Something that learned the shape of headlights. That learned how to drive on normal roads. How to wait. How to follow. It is patient. Much more patient than anything human. And every night when I park in my driveway and walk to my front door, I feel eyes watching from my back seat. Eyes I cannot quite see in the reflection of my car windows. Eyes that are waiting for me to take another wrong turn. The truly terrifying thing? I checked. There is no Route 44 in Nevada. There never was. The exit I took should not exist. But somewhere out there in the desert, that road is still waiting. And the next time someone takes a wrong turn at midnight, exhausted and not paying attention, those lights will appear behind them too. They always do. And they never stop following. Story 5. Turn that shouldn't exist. I need to tell you about the night I drove through something that should not exist. This happened 6 months ago on Interstate 40, somewhere between Flagstaff and Albuquerque, and I still check my rearview mirror every few seconds when I drive at night. What I saw out there in the darkness changed everything I thought I understood about reality. It started with a detour sign, simple orange reflective letters that said, "Road work ahead, exit now." I had driven this route dozens of times for work, hauling equipment between Arizona and New Mexico, and there had never been construction on this particular stretch. But it was 2 a.m, I was exhausted, and I trusted the sign. That trust was my first mistake. The exit ramp curved down into absolute darkness. My headlights barely penetrated the thick shadows that seemed to swallow the light itself. No street lamps, no buildings, just empty desert and a narrow 2-lane road that stretched ahead like a black ribbon. The GPS on my phone immediately lost signal. The radio turned to static. Even the dashboard clock started behaving strangely, the numbers flickering between 217 and 218 over and over again, never moving forward. I should have turned around right then. Every instinct screamed at me to reverse course and find my way back to the interstate. But the road behind me had disappeared into such complete darkness that I convinced myself moving forward was safer than backing up blind. The human mind does terrible things when it tries to rationalize fear. The road felt wrong from the beginning, not just empty or eerie, but fundamentally wrong in ways I struggle to explain. The asphalt looked too smooth, too perfect, like it had been poured yesterday but also somehow ancient. The white lines dividing the lanes glowed with an intensity that hurt to look at directly. And the desert on either side sat absolutely still. No wind, no animals, no movement whatsoever, just endless stretches of sand and rock frozen in my headlights like a photograph. I drove for what felt like 10 minutes, maybe 15, watching my odometer click forward. 5 miles, 10 miles, 15, but the landscape never changed. Every cactus looked identical. Every rock formation repeated itself. The same twisted Joshua tree appeared again and again on my right side, impossible but undeniable. I was covering distance, burning fuel, but going nowhere. The clock still flickered. 217, 218, 217, 218. That was when the real horror began to settle into my bones. This was not just a wrong turn. This was something else entirely. Something disturbing and unnatural that defied every law of physics and geography I had ever known. I pressed harder on the accelerator, desperate to find the end of this nightmare road, to see anything different, anything that proved I was still moving through normal space. 60 miles per hour became 70. 70 became 80. The engine roared and the steering wheel vibrated in my hands, but the scenery remained frozen. The same endless repetition of desert and darkness. My fuel gauge had not moved. My phone showed no passage of time. I was trapped in a moment that stretched on forever, driving through a place that could not exist but did. I started seeing things in my peripheral vision. Shadows that moved wrong. Shapes that stood just beyond the reach of my headlights, tall and impossibly thin, watching me pass. Every time I tried to look directly at them, they vanished, but I could feel their presence. Feel their attention fixed on me with a hunger that made my skin crawl. The air inside the truck grew cold despite the heater blasting, and my breath came out in visible clouds. The most terrifying part was not the shadows or the impossible geography. It was the growing certainty that I was not alone on this road. Something was driving alongside me, just out of sight, matching my speed perfectly. I could hear it, a second engine, slightly out of sync with mine, rumbling through the darkness. But whenever I looked to my left or right, I saw only empty road and frozen desert. Then the engine sounds multiplied. 3 vehicles, 5, Dozens. An invisible convoy surrounding me. Their engines creating a deafening chorus that shook the truck's frame. I could not see them, but I knew they were there. Knew they were closing in. The temperature dropped further. Frost formed on the inside of my windows. My hands went numb on the steering wheel. I slammed on the brakes, hoping to break free of whatever hellish procession I had joined. The truck skidded and fishtailed, rubber screaming against asphalt, and finally lurched to a stop in the middle of the road. The invisible engines cut out simultaneously. Silence fell like a physical weight, so complete and oppressive that my ears rang from the absence of sound. The headlights illuminated the road ahead. Still straight, still empty, still wrong. But now I noticed something new. Tire tracks in the dust along the shoulder. Dozens of them, hundreds, all heading in the same direction I had been driving, stretching back as far as I could see. Fresh tracks and old tracks. Tracks from cars and trucks and vehicles that left patterns I did not recognize. How many people had made this same mistake? How many had driven this road that should not exist? I sat there in the chilling silence, trying to decide what to do next. Forward meant continuing into the unknown. Backward meant driving blind into darkness so thick it felt solid. Both options filled me with a dread so profound I could barely breathe. My hands shook. Sweat ran down my face despite the freezing temperature. This was fear beyond anything I had experienced. Not fear of death, but fear of being lost forever in a place outside of normal reality. That was when I saw the figure standing in the road ahead. Perfectly still, illuminated by my headlights but somehow not quite there. Like looking at someone through rippled glass. Tall and thin and wrong in proportions that made my eyes hurt. It did not move, did not breathe, just stood and watched me with a tension that felt like needles pressing into my skull. I threw the truck into reverse and floored it, not caring anymore about what lay behind me. The tires spun and caught, and I rocketed backward down the road, watching the figure shrink in my headlights until it disappeared into the darkness. The invisible engine started up again, all around me, following me backward, hurting me like prey. Something changed. I felt it more than saw it. A shift in the air, a loosening of whatever held this place together. The road began to curve. The landscape started to vary. The clock on my dashboard jumped forward. 2:19, 2:20, 2:21. Time was moving again. I burst back onto Interstate 40 so suddenly it felt like breaking through a membrane. The normal world crashed back into existence around me. Streetlights, other cars, the GPS signal returning with a cheerful ping. The radio playing a country song mid-chorus. Everything bright and loud and blessedly ordinary. I pulled over at the next rest stop and sat there for 3 hours, shaking, waiting for sunrise. Other truckers came and went, oblivious to my terror, complaining about traffic and weather like the universe made sense. I wanted to tell them what I had experienced, but the words would not come. How do you explain driving through nowhere? How do you describe a road that exists outside of space and time? When dawn finally came, I got back on the interstate and drove straight through to Albuquerque. I have not taken that route at night since. I have searched maps and satellite images, trying to find that exit, that detour sign, any evidence that the turn existed. There is nothing, just empty desert where the ramp should have been, but I know it is out there, waiting, that stretch of road that never ends, where time stops and things that should not exist watch you from the shadows. I know because I still see it sometimes when I close my eyes. Still hear those invisible engines in my nightmares. Still feel the presence of whatever drives that haunted highway, patient and hungry, waiting for the next wrong turn. The terrifying truth is this. There are places in America that exist between the cracks of our maps, spaces that logic cannot touch, roads that lead nowhere and everywhere at once. And once you have driven through them, once you have felt that crushing wrongness, you understand that the world is much stranger and more frightening than anyone wants to admit. I drive during daylight hours now, always. And when I see detour signs on lonely highways, I keep going straight, no matter what they say. Because some turns should never be taken, some roads should never be driven, and some darkness should never be entered, no matter how simple and harmless it appears. The exit is still there. I know it is, waiting for the next exhausted driver, the next wrong turn, the next person who will spend forever driving through that impossible place, surrounded by shadows and invisible engines and the horrible certainty that they will never find their way home. Story 6. Everyone warned me about that road. The old man at the gas station grabbed my wrist when I asked for directions. His fingers cold and surprisingly strong, and said the only thing anyone in that town ever said about Route 49, Don, to take it after dark. I should have listened. God, I should have listened. This happened last September during my cross-country move from Boston to Seattle. I'd been driving for 3 days straight, taking back roads to avoid the monotony of interstates, documenting small-town America for a travel blog that nobody read. Somewhere in rural Montana, my GPS died completely, and I found myself in a place called Ashford. Population 463 according to a faded sign. The kind of forgotten town where everyone knows everyone, and strangers get noticed immediately. The gas station was the only business still open at 7 in the evening. The old man working the register looked like he'd been there since the building was constructed, his face weathered like old leather, eyes that had seen too much of something he couldn't to talk about. When I spread my crumpled map across the counter and traced my route, his expression changed. That is when he grabbed me. Don, to take Route 49 after dark, he repeated, releasing my wrist. His hand left a cold spot on my skin that lasted for hours. I asked why. He just shook his head and looked away, suddenly very interested in organizing lottery tickets that were already perfectly organized. The fear in his eyes was real, raw, the kind of fear that comes from experience, not superstition. I asked him for an alternate route. He drew a long, winding path on my map that added 4 hours to my drive. I thanked him, paid for my gas and coffee, and left. But as I sat in my car studying that detour, frustration built inside me. 4 extra hours. I was already exhausted, already behind schedule. Route 49 would save me time and money. It was just a road. Just a road. The sun was setting as I made my decision, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and crimson that looked too much like blood. I pulled out of the gas station and headed for Route 49. In my rearview mirror, I saw the old man standing in the doorway, watching me go with an expression of profound sadness. Route 49 started normally enough. 2-lane highway cutting through dense forest, the kind of road you see throughout the Pacific Northwest. The pavement was decent, recently maintained, with fresh yellow lines down the center. Nothing scary about it, nothing unsettling, just trees and twilight and the hum of my tires on asphalt. I relaxed. Clearly, the old man was just a superstitious local, the kind who believed in urban legends and ghost stories. Every small town had roads like this, places where teenagers claim to see strange lights or hear unexplained sounds. Local folklore designed to make boring places seem more interesting. That confidence lasted about 20 minutes. The forest changed as full darkness fell. The trees grew taller, more tightly packed, their branches interweaving overhead to form a tunnel that blocked out the stars. My headlights seemed weaker here, as if the darkness was thicker, more resistant to illumination. And the silence was absolute. No wind, no animal sounds, nothing but the engine of my car and the creeping sensation that I was being watched by something hidden in those endless trees. I turned on the radio for company, static on every station. Not the normal static you get between signals, but something else. Something underneath the white noise that sounded almost like whispering. Dozens of voices speaking in unison, too low to understand but definitely there. I shut it off quickly, preferring the silence to that disturbing sound. That was when I saw the first warning sign. It wasn't an official road sign. Someone had nailed a piece of plywood to a tree, and painted on it in dripping red letters were 2 words, "Turn back." The paint looked fresh, glistening wetly in my headlights as I passed. My heart rate increased. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, but I kept driving. I'd already committed. Turning around would mean retracing 20 minutes and then taking that 4-hour detour. I'd arrive in Seattle sometime tomorrow afternoon instead of tonight. And besides, it was probably just local kids trying to scare travelers. A prank, nothing more. The signs appeared every few miles after that. Different handwriting, different materials, spray painted on rocks, carved into trees, scrawled on sheets of metal, all saying variations of the same thing. Turn back, go home. Don, T-stop, leave while you can. Each one more desperate than the last, as if written by people who knew exactly what lay ahead and were trying to save whoever came after. The horrifying part was how many there were. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Years worth of warnings left by travelers who had driven this road before me and felt compelled to leave messages for those who would follow. I should have turned around. Right then, seeing those signs, I should have done a U-turn and driven back to Ashford. But fear works in strange ways. Sometimes it paralyzes you. Sometimes it pushes you forward because going back means acknowledging that the danger is real. and our minds will do anything to avoid that acknowledgement. So I drove deeper into whatever nightmare Route 49 had waiting. The road began to change. The pavement became rougher, older, cracked and broken in places. The yellow lines faded and disappeared entirely, and the forest pressed closer, branches scraping against both sides of my car with sounds like fingernails on metal. I slowed down, partly because of the road conditions, partly because every instinct I had was screaming at me to be cautious. That's when my headlights caught something on the shoulder ahead. A car, sitting half buried in the undergrowth, covered in moss and vines, its windows dark and empty. As I passed, I saw another one, then another. Abandoned vehicles scattered along both sides of the road. Some recent, some ancient, all left to rot in this forsaken place. How many people had driven Route 49 and never made it out? My phone had no signal. No surprise there, but when I checked it, I noticed something chilling. The time display kept changing, jumping forward 5 minutes, then back 3, then forward again. Time itself seemed unstable here, as if this road existed slightly outside normal reality. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, suddenly desperate to reach the other end of Route 49, to escape this place that felt increasingly like a trap. The speedometer climbed to 50, then 60. Too fast for these conditions, but fear had taken over rational thought. A figure appeared in the middle of the road. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded, tires shrieking, barely stopping before hitting the person standing motionless in my headlights. It was a woman in a white dress, her back to me, long dark hair hanging down to her waist. She moved, didn't acknowledge the car that had almost killed her. My heart hammered in my chest. I honked the horn. She remained perfectly still. I honked again, longer this time. Nothing. The creepy, unsettling wrongness of her posture, her complete lack of reaction, made my skin crawl. Then she turned around. Her face was normal, completely, disturbingly normal, pretty, even, mid-30s, with sad eyes and an expression of profound loneliness. She looked directly at me and raised one hand, pointing behind her, further down the road. Her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear through the windshield. But I could read her lips clearly enough. They were waiting. Then she stepped off the road and walked into the forest, disappearing between the trees so quickly it was as if the darkness had simply swallowed her whole. I sat there, engine idling, every nerve in my body screaming. The rational part of my brain insisted she was just a hitchhiker, someone whose car had broken down. But the primal part, the part that still remembered when humans were prey animals, knew better. Knew that nothing about her was right, that her appearance was a warning, not a coincidence. I should have reversed right then. Should have driven backward down Route 49 until I reached safety. But something prevented me. Not curiosity, not bravery, something worse, a compulsion. As if the road itself had wrapped invisible hooks into my mind and was reeling me forward. I started driving again. The trees opened up suddenly, and I found myself entering a clearing. Buildings stood on both sides of the road. A small town, or what remained of one. Structures that had been abandoned decades ago, now slowly being reclaimed by the forest. A general store with its windows broken. A church with a collapsed roof. Houses with doors hanging open like slack mouths. Every building was dark except one. The diner on my right blazed with light, every window glowing warmly, as if filled with customers and activity. I could see figures moving inside, shadows cast against the walls. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten in hours. The exhaustion of 3 days driving suddenly crashed over me. A part of my mind screamed that stopping was a terrible idea. But the diner looked safe, normal, a refuge in this nightmare stretch of road. And I was so tired, so hungry, so desperate for human contact after miles of terrifying isolation. I pulled into the parking lot. The gravel crunched under my tires with a sound that seemed too loud in the oppressive silence. I turned off the engine and sat there, staring at the diner's bright windows, trying to see the people inside more clearly. But the figures remained indistinct, just shadows moving back and forth in an endless loop. That is when I realized something horrible. The shadows weren't doing anything. They weren't sitting at tables or working behind a counter. They were just moving, walking in circles, pacing, like something was imitating what it thought a busy diner should look like without understanding the actual behavior of humans. I restarted my car immediately. The engine turned over once, twice, then died completely. I tried again. Nothing. The battery was dead, even though it had been fine 30 seconds ago. My headlights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness broken only by the eerie glow from the diner. The door to the diner opened. A figure stepped out, silhouetted against the light. It stood on the front step, facing my car, waiting. Even from this distance, I could feel its attention focused on me with disturbing intensity. It raised one arm in a beckoning gesture, inviting me to come inside. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. The stupid protagonist who ignores all warning signs and walks into obvious danger. I wasn't going to be that person. I pulled out my phone. Still no signal, but the flashlight worked. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and got out of the car. I was going to walk, run if necessary, back down Route 49, back to Ashford, back to civilization. I didn't care if it took all night. Anything was better than staying here. The moment my feet hit the gravel, every light in the diner went out simultaneously. The sudden darkness was absolute and disorienting. I turned on my phone, its flashlight, its weak beam barely pushing back the shadows. In that dim circle of light, I could see the figure from the diner was no longer on the step. It was standing right in front of me. I hadn't heard it move, hadn't seen it approach. It had simply appeared close enough that I could have reached out and touched it. My flashlight illuminated its face, and I wished to God it hadn't, because what I saw wasn't the human. It wore a human shape like an ill-fitting costume, but the proportions were wrong. The angles of its face didn't quite work. Its eyes reflected my light like an animal, glowing with a hunger that was both alien and ancient. It opened its mouth. Instead of words, a sound came out that bypassed my ears entirely and seemed to resonate directly in my skull. A frequency that humans weren't meant to hear, carrying meanings that human language couldn't express. But I understood it anyway, understood it in some deep, terrified part of my consciousness. It wanted me to stay, to join the others, to become another shadow moving endlessly in that false diner, another warning that future travelers would ignore. I ran. Blind panic drove me back toward the road, my phone, its flashlight bouncing wildly as my feet pounded against gravel and then pavement. Behind me, I heard other sounds, footsteps that didn't match human rhythm, breathing that sounded wrong, and that horrible resonance in my skull, growing louder, more insistent, trying to stop me, to turn me around, to bring me back. I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. The darkness pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating. My flashlight dimmed, its battery draining impossibly fast. Then suddenly, miraculously, I saw different lights ahead, red and blue, flashing. A police car parked across the road, blocking it. An officer standing beside it, waving a flashlight. I sprinted toward him, sobbing with relief. He caught me as I stumbled, his solid, real hands the first human contact that felt right in hours. He asked if I was okay, asked what I was doing on Route 49. I tried to explain, the words tumbling out incoherently. The diner, the figure, the thing that wasn't the human. He nodded slowly, with the expression of someone who had heard this story before. Many times before. He told me I was lucky. Told me most people who stopped at that diner were never seen again. He walked me back to his car and radioed for a tow truck for my vehicle. He told me Route 49 had been officially closed for years, but people kept finding ways onto it. The state had tried everything. Barricades, fences, warnings. Nothing worked. The road wanted to be found. It wanted travelers. I asked him what was out there. What that thing was. He looked at me with eyes that held the same fear I'd seen in the old man at the gas station. Some things you were better off not knowing, he said. They towed my car out the next morning. The mechanic said there was nothing wrong with it. The battery was fine. The engine started perfectly. I drove to Seattle, finished my move, tried to return to normal life. But some nights, when I'm driving alone after dark, I see roads that aren't on my GPS. Shortcuts that promise to save time. And I remember that diner, those shadows, that thing wearing human shape like a mask. I remember everyone who tried to warn me, and I understand now why they couldn't explain in detail. Because some horrors can, to be described, they have to be experienced to be believed. And once you've experienced them, you realize that explaining them would only draw more victims to the very place you were trying to warn them away from. So I'll just say this. If you ever find yourself in Montana, and someone tells you not to take Route 49 after dark, listen to them. Don't to ask why. Don't to demand explanations. Just listen. Because that road is still out there, waiting. And whatever lives along it is always hungry for the next person who thinks they were too smart to heed warnings that have been carved into trees and painted on rocks by desperate, terrified survivors. Everyone warned me about that road. I wish I understood why. Story 7. No signal on County Road 12. The moment my phone lost signal, I knew something was terrifying wrong. Not just the normal dead zone you hit in rural areas, but a complete and sudden cutoff that happened the instant my tires crossed onto County Road 12. The screen went black, then flickered back to life, showing no bars, no emergency calls available, nothing. Just a useless brick of metal and glass in my hand. I should explain what brought me to this godforsaken stretch of backwoods Pennsylvania in the first place. My job as an insurance adjuster sends me to remote locations sometimes, investigating claims in areas most people forget exist. This particular claim involved a farmhouse fire 30 miles outside of a town called Millerton, population 400 and dropping. The scary part wasn't the destination. It was what happened when I took the shortcut. County Road 12 wasn't on my GPS. I found it on an old paper map at a gas station, a thin line cutting through miles of state forest that would save me nearly an hour. The kid working the register gave me a strange look when I asked about it, but he was probably 17 and didn't say much of anything. I dismissed his unsettling silence as typical small-town weirdness and headed out. The road started normal enough. 2 lanes, faded yellow lines, trees pressing close on both sides. But as I drove deeper, something changed. The forest grew denser and darker, the canopy overhead blocking out the afternoon sun until I was driving through a perpetual twilight. The shadows between the trees seemed to move independently, shifting and crawling in ways that made my eyes hurt when I tried to focus on them. That is when the isolation became absolute. My car started making a sound I'd never heard before. A grinding, clicking noise from somewhere deep in the engine that grew louder with each mile. I pressed the accelerator, trying to maintain speed, but the car was dying. I could feel it losing power, the steering wheel pulling left like something was dragging me off the road. Then it stalled completely. The engine cut out without warning, and momentum carried me another 100 feet before I rolled to a stop in the middle of that narrow road. The silence that followed was horrifying. No bird calls, no wind through the trees, no distant traffic sounds, just absolute, suffocating quiet that pressed against my eardrums like water pressure. I tried the ignition, dead. Tried my phone again, hoping that maybe, somehow, a signal had returned. Nothing. The creepy realization settled over me that I was completely cut off from the world, stranded on a road that didn't officially exist with no way to call for help. I got out to check under the hood, though no mechanic. The air outside felt wrong immediately. Too thick, too still, and carrying a smell like old leaves and something else. Something rotten and organic that made my stomach turn. The forest pressed close on both sides, the trees so tightly packed that I couldn't see more than 20 feet into the darkness between them. The engine looked fine. No visible damage, no loose wires, nothing to explain the sudden failure. But when I touched the battery cable, the metal was ice cold despite the engine having been running minutes before. That disturbing detail made no sense. Engines generate heat, batteries stay warm. This felt like my car had been sitting in a freezer. That was when I noticed the other vehicles. They weren't obvious at first, hidden among the trees just off the road. But once I saw one, I started seeing them everywhere. Cars, trucks, even an old school bus, all abandoned and slowly being consumed by the forest. Rust ate through metal, vines crawled through broken windows, trees grew up through engine blocks. Some looked decades old, but others seemed much more recent. A blue Honda Civic sat just 10 feet off the road, its paint still relatively clean, its tires still holding air. Through the dirty windshield, I could see a phone sitting on the dashboard. An iPhone, recent model. Someone had left their phone behind, which meant they either found help or something had made them run without it. The nightmare clarity of my situation finally hit me. This wasn't just a dead zone. This was a place where people got stuck and never left. A place that collected travelers and held them until something happened. Something bad. I decided to walk. The map showed Millerton was only about 8 miles ahead, and I passed a small town called Harrow maybe 6 miles back. Either direction would eventually lead to help, to people, to safety. I chose to go forward, some instinct telling me that going back would be worse. The road seemed to stretch and distort as I walked, distance becoming meaningless and eerie. I did walk for what felt like 20 minutes, passing landmarks I did make mental notes of, only to turn around and see those same landmarks still visible behind me, barely farther away than when I started. The forest was playing tricks with perspective and space, keeping me trapped in a pocket of road that shouldn't exist. Then I heard the footsteps, not human footsteps. These were too heavy, too irregular, the sound of something massive moving through the forest parallel to the road. Branches snapped under its weight. Undergrowth rustled with its passage, but I never saw what made the sounds. It stayed just beyond the edge of visibility, pacing me, following as I walked. The fear that gripped me was primal and overwhelming. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to keep walking at a steady pace. Running would mean leaving the road, and something about that option felt even more dangerous. The road was a rule, a boundary. Whatever followed me in the trees seemed bound to stay in the trees. Until it wasn't. I saw it cross the road ahead of me, maybe 200 yards distant. Not an animal, not a person, something that moved wrong, its proportions off, its gait too fluid and boneless. It emerged from the left side, crossed the pavement in 3 long strides, and disappeared into the right side. The horrifying glimpse lasted maybe 5 seconds, but the image burned into my brain. Then I saw the houses. They appeared suddenly, breaking through the tree line like a mirage. 5 or 6 structures, old farmhouses and cabins, sitting in a small clearing beside the road. Lights glowed in some windows. Smoke rose from one chimney. Signs of life and habitation in this haunted stretch of nowhere. Relief flooded through me until I got closer and saw the disturbing details. The houses weren't touching the ground. They hovered maybe 3 inches above the earth, supported by nothing visible. Their walls were wrong too, built from materials that shifted and changed as I watched. Wood became stone, became something organic and moving. The lights in the windows weren't electric bulbs. They were something else, pulsing with a rhythm like breathing, casting shadows that moved independently of any light source. And the smoke from the chimney didn't rise. It fell, pooling around the base of the house like fog. I stopped walking. Every nerve in my body screamed danger at a pitch I couldn't ignore. These weren't real houses. They were lures, traps designed to look like safety, to draw in desperate travelers who needed shelter and help. The doors began to open. One by one, the entrances to each house swung wide, revealing darkness inside so complete that it seemed to pull at my vision. No light escaped those interiors. They were voids, empty spaces that wanted to be filled. And from within them came sounds. Not voices exactly, but approximations of human speech, calling names that weren't mine but felt like they should be. I ran. Pure terror drove my legs as I sprinted past those nightmare houses, their doors gaping like mouths, that terrible not speech calling after me. The thing in the forest crashed through the trees, keeping pace, no longer bothering to stay hidden. I could hear its breathing now, a wet, rattling sound that came from too many mouths. The road began to change. The pavement cracked and buckled, grass pushing up through splits in the asphalt. The yellow lines faded and disappeared. The trees pressed closer, their branches reaching across the road like fingers trying to interlock and seal me in. County Road 12 was unmaking itself, returning to forest, trying to erase the only path back to reality. Then I saw light ahead. Real light. Sunlight breaking through the canopy in a way it hadn't for hours. The forest began to thin. The shadows retreated. The sounds behind me faded into silence. I stumbled out onto Highway 22, a major state route with actual traffic. A truck roared past, its horn blaring at my sudden appearance. Normal. Real. Safe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Signal bars returning, notifications flooding in from the hours I'd been gone. But here is the chilling truth that keeps me awake at night. When I checked the time, only 20 minutes had passed since my car stalled. 20 minutes, not the hours I experienced. And when I called a tow truck to retrieve my vehicle, giving them exact directions to where I left it on County Road 12, the driver just laughed. He told me there was no County Road 12. Never had been. The state had planned one back in the 70s, even cleared some land and laid some pavement, but the project was abandoned after 3 construction workers disappeared. The few miles they completed were officially closed and removed from all maps in 1979. When I insisted I'd just been on it, that my car was still sitting there, he agreed to drive me out to look. We took Highway 22 to where County Road 12 should have connected, and found nothing. Just unbroken forest, old and wild and undisturbed. No road, no gap in the trees, no sign that a path had ever existed there. But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. And sometimes, late at night, my phone loses signal for just a moment. In that moment of darkness, I hear it, that wet, rattling breathing from something with too many mouths. The sound of footsteps that aren't quite human, pacing outside my house, following me still. The terrifying realization is that I did escape County Road 12, but a piece of it followed me home. Story 8. Road that kept getting narrower. The pavement ended exactly 3.7 miles after I stopped being able to turn around. I know because I watched my odometer the entire time, praying it would reset, praying I would wake up, praying this was just some horrifying nightmare brought on by bad truck stop coffee and too many hours behind the wheel. It was not a nightmare. I am still living it. Let me tell you about the most terrifying mistake of my life. About the road that should not exist. About what happens when you trust your GPS more than your instincts and find yourself driving into something that feels wrong from the very first turn. I am a long-haul trucker, 42 years old, been driving commercial routes for 17 years. I have seen every highway, every back road, every shortcut between Seattle and Miami. I thought I knew every trick, every route, every way to shave an hour off a delivery time. That confidence almost killed me. The delivery was simple. Auto parts from Portland to a small warehouse outside Bend, Oregon. 8-hour drive. Easy money. I left at 4 in the morning, planning to arrive before lunch, grab some food, and head back. Standard Tuesday. Boring. Safe. Around hour 5, traffic on Highway 26 backed up solid. Some kind of accident ahead. Flares, flashing lights. The whole road shut down. The dispatcher called and said I had 90 minutes to make my delivery window or we would lose the contract. 90 minutes. The highway was not moving. That is when my GPS offered an alternate route. I should have known better. Should have waited. Should have called the client and explained. But 17 years of driving makes you cocky. Makes you think you know better than common sense. The GPS showed a road that cut through the Ochoco forest. Looked like it would save 40 minutes. The map showed it connecting back to Highway 26 about 30 miles east. I took the turn. The road started normal enough. 2-lane blacktop, faded yellow lines, trees pressing close on both sides, ponderosa pines and Douglas firs creating a canopy that blocked most of the morning light. The shadows felt thick, oppressive, but I convinced myself it was just the forest. Just trees. After 2 miles, the road narrowed slightly. The yellow lines disappeared. Just 2 lanes of blacktop with no shoulder. Trees crowding closer, their branches hanging so low they scraped the top of my trailer. The sound made my skin crawl. Long metallic shrieks like fingernails on a chalkboard. I checked my GPS. Still showed the road continuing for another 12 miles before reconnecting to the highway. Still showed it as a legitimate route. No warnings, no errors. Just a thin blue line on a screen telling me to keep going. The smart thing would have been to stop right there. Turn around while I still had room. But the road was narrow, maybe 14 feet wide. My truck with the trailer was 13 feet. Turning around would mean a 15-point turn, maybe more, and there was nowhere to pull off. Just blacktop and trees that felt like they were watching. So I kept driving, telling myself it would widen up ahead. Roads always widen eventually. They have to. They do not have to. 3 miles in, the blacktop started to break up. Chunks missing. Potholes. The road surface looked ancient, like it had not been maintained in decades. How was this even on my GPS? How was this a recommended route? I slowed down. 20 miles per hour. 15. The trailer bounced and swayed behind me. Something in the cargo area shifted and banged. The trees pressed closer. Branches scraped both sides of the trailer now. Constant. Eerie, like the forest was trying to grab me. 4 miles in, the pavement started disappearing into gravel. Not all at once. Patches at first. Blacktop giving way to loose stone. Then more gravel than pavement. Then just gravel with broken asphalt chunks scattered through it like bones and dirt. The road kept narrowing. 12 feet wide. 11. The trees were so close now I could not see more than 10 feet into the forest on either side. Just darkness and shadows and the sense of vast empty space beyond. I tried to back up, put the truck in reverse and looked at my mirrors. But the road behind me curved. I could not see more than 20 feet. Could not tell if it was wide enough. One wrong move and I would jackknife the trailer or slide into the trees. I would be stuck. completely and utterly stuck. The only option was forward. 5 miles in, the road became pure dirt. Hard-packed, ancient. Ruts from tires that looked decades old. The path was maybe 10 feet wide now. Trees on both sides were so close their trunks nearly touched my mirrors. How was I even fitting? How was this possible? My GPS still showed the road continuing. Still showed me en route. But the estimated arrival time kept increasing. First by 10 minutes. Then 20. Then it just showed dashes. Like the system could not calculate anymore. Like I had driven off the map into somewhere the satellites could not see. The fear started then. Real fear. The kind that makes your mouth dry and your hands shake. I was in a 30,000-pound truck on a dirt path in the middle of nowhere with no way to turn around and no idea where this road went. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. That this road felt wrong. That something deeply disturbing was happening. 6 miles in, I started seeing things in the trees. Shapes, tall and thin and standing absolutely still between the trunks. At first I thought they were just darker trees. Shadows, tricks of light. But they moved when I was not looking directly at them. I would see one in my peripheral vision, turn my head, and it would be gone. Or closer, or in a different position entirely. The road kept narrowing, 9 feet wide, 8. My mirrors were folding back from brushing against branches. Leaves and pine needles covered my windshield. The path ahead looked more like a hiking trail than a road. How had I gotten here? How had this happened? I tried my radio, static. Tried my phone, no signal. Not even one bar. The GPS still showed that thin blue line stretching ahead, but now it was flickering. Glitching. Sometimes the entire screen would go black for a few seconds before coming back. 7 miles in, the shapes in the trees started following me. I counted 6 of them. Tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet. Impossibly thin. They moved through the forest parallel to my truck, keeping pace exactly. Never making a sound, never breaking branches or disturbing the undergrowth. Just gliding through the darkness like shadows cast by no light source. My headlights were on now even though it was midday. The forest canopy blocked everything. It was twilight dim, that unsettling gray light that makes distances impossible to judge and turns everything eerie and unfamiliar. The headlight beams barely penetrated 20 feet ahead. They showed the dirt road getting narrower and narrower until it looked like a hallway with walls of bark and branches. 8 miles in, I saw the first truck. It was off to the left, about 30 feet into the trees. A big rig, maybe 20 years old, covered in moss and vines and rust. The trailer door was open, empty. The cab windows were shattered. Something had torn the driver's side door completely off its hinges. The metal was bent outward, ripped, like something massive had forced its way inside. My blood turned to ice water. Other trucks appeared as I crawled forward. Some were older, 30s, 40s, ancient delivery trucks with faded logos I did not recognize. Some were newer. I saw a FedEx truck from maybe 5 years ago. Saw a Prime trailer. The vehicles were scattered through the forest like toys dropped by a giant child. All abandoned, all torn apart, all empty. The shapes in the trees multiplied. Dozens now, hundreds maybe. I could not tell. They filled the forest on both sides. Standing, watching, waiting, and the road kept getting narrower. 7 feet wide. 6. My truck barely fit. Branches scraped metal with sounds like screaming. The trees pressed so close I could see the texture of their bark in perfect detail. Could see insects crawling on them. Could see something else too. Scratches, long deep gouges in the wood. Claw marks, going up the trunks, disappearing into the canopy above. I was breathing too fast, hyperventilating. My vision swam. This was impossible. This was not real. Roads do not work like this. Physics do not work like this. You cannot drive deeper into a forest and have the path keep shrinking unless something wants you trapped. 9 miles in, my GPS died completely. The screen went dark, would not turn back on. My phone was dead too. Battery drained from full to nothing in seconds. The truck's dashboard lights flickered. The engine sputtered. For one horrible moment I thought it would die and leave me stranded. But it caught, kept running. The headlights dimmed but stayed on. The road was maybe 5 feet wide now. Impossible. My truck could not fit. But somehow it did. The trailer scraped both sides continuously. Metal shrieking, paint peeling away. I could hear things falling from the cargo area. Hear things breaking. But I could not stop. Could not even slow down. Because behind me, where the road should have been, there was only darkness. Only trees. The path was disappearing as I passed over it. The shapes closed in. They stood at the edge of the road now. Just beyond my headlights. I could almost see details. Arms too long. Heads too narrow. Skin like bark. Eyes that reflected my lights like mirrors. They reached toward the truck with fingers that had too many joints. But they did not touch. Not yet, like they were waiting for something. Waiting for the road to finish disappearing. 10 miles in, the road ended. Not gradually, just stopped. One moment I was on a narrow dirt path. The next moment there was a wall of trees. Solid, impassable. The trunks were twisted together like braided rope. There was no way forward. No way back. Just a tiny clearing barely big enough for my truck and hundreds of those shapes surrounding me in the darkness. My engine died. The headlights went out. Total silence except for my ragged breathing and the creak of settling metal. I sat there in the dark and understood. This was a trap. Had always been a trap. The road was bait. The GPS was bait. Every wrong turn, every ignored instinct, every moment of confidence had led me here. To this impossible place where truckers disappeared. Where roads ate travelers and forests swallowed evidence and things that should not exist waited in patient hunger. The shapes moved closer. I heard them now. Footsteps that sounded like breaking wood. Breathing that sounded like wind through dead leaves. They surrounded the truck. Dozens of hands pressed against the metal. The cab rocked. The door handle rattled. I did the only thing I could think of. I prayed. Not to God exactly, but to the road, to whatever intelligence designed this trap. I promised things, offered things, begged for mercy I knew I did not deserve. And impossibly, the engine turned over. The headlights blazed back to life. And ahead, where the wall of trees had been, there was an opening. Narrow, maybe 4 feet wide, barely big enough. But there, I drove through without thinking. The mirrors ripped off. The side panels screamed. Metal tore, glass shattered. But I fit. The truck pushed through that impossible gap and suddenly I was on pavement. Real pavement. Highway 26. Normal traffic. Afternoon sunlight. I pulled over immediately and collapsed against the steering wheel. When I finally looked back, there was no forest road. No opening. Just solid trees. Normal trees. Daylight trees. Like nothing had ever been there. The police found my truck 3 hours later. I was unconscious. Dehydrated. Covered in scratches. The trailer was destroyed. Scraped down to bare metal on both sides. The cargo was ruined. The company fired me. Said I drove off-road deliberately. Said I was lying about the GPS. About everything. But I still have my phone. And deep in the deleted files, hidden in the cache, I found one screenshot the GPS took automatically. It shows that road. Shows it clearly. And in the trees on either side, if you zoom in far enough, you can see them. The shapes, the watchers, the things that wait for the next driver to take the wrong turn. The road is still there, still on some GPS systems, still waiting. And the truly terrifying thing? I found online forums, dozens of truckers with identical stories. Roads that narrow, forests that trap, shapes that watch, all across America. Different states, different routes, but always the same pattern. The roads are hunting, and they are patient. And sooner or later, everyone takes a wrong turn. I do not drive anymore. Cannot. But sometimes late at night I check those forums and see new posts. Fresh stories, recent disappearances. The roads are still there. Still narrowing. Still leading people into darkness they cannot escape. And I wonder how many trucks are scattered in those impossible forests. How many drivers never found their way out? How many are still sitting in their cabs right now, surrounded by darkness and watchers, waiting for mercy that will never come? The pavement always disappears. The road always narrows. And by the time you realize your mistake, there is nowhere left to turn around. Story 9. What I found in the walls. My wife left me 3 days before I found out I was being watched. Not just watched, studied. Like something was taking careful notes on every single thing I did, every breath I took, every time I looked in a mirror. The terrifying realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in slowly, like a creepy shadow spreading across a wall. And by the time I understood what was happening, it was already far too late to escape. My name is Tom. I am a real estate appraiser, which means I spend most of my time inside other people's homes, making judgments about their worth, measuring square footage, evaluating foundations, looking for problems nobody else wants to see. 3 months ago, I got a call about a property that seemed routine. A foreclosure in rural Pennsylvania, about 2 hours from my office. The house had been empty for almost a year. The bank wanted an appraisal before they put it on the market. Straightforward work, money in the bank. I never imagined that taking that job would be the beginning of something horrifying. The back road leading to the property was narrow and poorly maintained. Trees hung over the asphalt like skeletal fingers, and the further I drove, the more the world seemed to close in around me. My GPS stopped working about 3 miles before I arrived. No signal. No nothing. Just me and the road and the growing sense that something about this place was deeply unsettling. The fear started small, just a tightness in my chest, but it grew with every mile. At the end of the road stood a single structure. No lights, no signs of life, but something felt aware. The house was Victorian, maybe 150 years old, with peeling white paint and dark shutters that looked like they hadn't been opened in decades. The front porch sagged. The windows stared down at me like empty eye sockets, and standing in front of it, I felt something I'd never experienced before. A prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like invisible eyes examining every inch of my skin. The chilling intuition that this place wasn't empty, that it was waiting for me. I should have left right then. Every instinct screamed that turning around was the smartest thing I could do. But I didn't. I got out of my car and walked toward the front door. The creepy feeling intensified with each step, like the house itself was breathing, drawing me closer. The disturbing silence was complete. No birds, no wind, no sound except the crunch of dead leaves beneath my shoes. The front door was locked, but a side window was broken. I pulled away the remaining glass and climbed inside, cutting my hand on a jagged edge. The pain was sharp and real, grounding me in the moment, but I barely noticed it. All my attention was on the darkness surrounding me. The horrifying smell hit me next. Something sweet and rotten, like meat left in the sun too long, mixed with something chemical that burned the inside of my nose. My eyes adjusted slowly to the gloom. The interior was in worse condition than the outside. Furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere, but what caught my attention was the walls. Every single wall was covered in writing, not graffiti, something far more methodical and terrifying. Hundreds of names, thousands of them, written in what looked like pencil, covering every surface from floor to ceiling. The creepy realization hit me like a punch. These were people, names, full names, dates, notes written next to each one. I reached out and touched one of the names. Sarah Mitchell, 1987. The unsettling feeling that I was looking at something sacred and horrible at the same time was overwhelming. These weren't random markings. This was a record. Documentation. The fear was building now, making my heart race, making my palms sweat. What had I stumbled into? I pulled out my phone to take pictures, but I couldn't get a signal. The eerie reality was that I was completely cut off from the outside world. No way to call for help. No way to contact anyone. The terrifying thought occurred to me that maybe that was intentional. Maybe the lack of signal wasn't an accident. Maybe it was designed that way. I moved deeper into the house, drawn forward by a morbid fascination I couldn't control. The names continued on every wall. Hundreds of them. Some recent, dates from just a few years ago. Some dating back decades. The darkness in the house seemed to deepen as I descended the stairs into the basement, and the smell became unbearable. I had to cover my mouth with my hand to keep from gagging. The basement was where things got genuinely horrifying. The walls down there were covered in photographs, old Polaroids and newer digital prints, all taped up in what looked like a deliberate pattern. They showed people, families, groups, all of them in this house, all of them smiling at the camera, though their eyes looked wrong somehow. Dead, empty, like whatever was looking out from behind their eyes wasn't quite human anymore. The chilling certainty that these photos documented something criminal, something unspeakable, was inescapable. And then I saw it, a workbench covered with tools. Not construction tools, something far more sinister. Surgical instruments, saws, drills, things I didn't want to identify. Dark stains covered the wooden surface, and around it, the floor had been carefully sealed with plastic sheeting. The horrifying understanding that I was looking at a workspace, a place where something terrible had been practiced, made my legs weak. I had to sit down before I collapsed. I sat on the basement floor for what felt like an hour, though it was probably only minutes. My mind kept trying to reject what I was seeing, to come up with rational explanations. Maybe this was a prank. Maybe someone was using the house as a haunted attraction. Maybe there was some innocent explanation for all of this. But the smell, the blood, the careful documentation, the unsettling reality was that none of those explanations fit. That was when I heard the sound, a creaking above my head, footsteps on the floor above, slow, deliberate footsteps moving through the house. The terrifying realization that I wasn't alone crashed over me like a wave. Someone else was in the house, had been in the house the entire time. The fear was primal now, pure survival instinct. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps moved across the ceiling, back and forth, pacing, searching. The chilling knowledge that whoever was up there was looking for me was almost unbearable. My hand went to my phone again, but the display was dark. Dead. The battery that had shown 70% just minutes ago was now completely drained. The horrifying possibility that something in this house was affecting electronic devices sent a new wave of panic through me. I moved silently toward the basement stairs, every nerve screaming with fear. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was even worse than the noise. The eerie feeling that something was listening, waiting for me to make a sound, was suffocating. I climbed the stairs one at a time, testing each step to make sure it wouldn't creak. The house was utterly still. Even the dust seemed to have stopped moving. When I reached the main floor, I saw something I'd missed when I first entered. A door, hidden behind what looked like a built-in cabinet. The cabinet had been pulled away, and the door beyond was open, revealing a narrow staircase leading up into darkness. The stairs were covered in dust except for the footprints. Fresh footprints. Someone had walked up those stairs recently. The unsettling thought that there was more to this house than I realized made my stomach turn. I heard it then, a sound from somewhere above. A whimpering, soft, barely audible, but definitely human. The terrifying possibility that someone was trapped in this house, that there might be victims somewhere in the upper floors, overcame my fear. I had to check. I had to see if anyone needed help. The stairs creaked under my weight despite my attempts to be silent. I climbed slowly, my eyes straining against the darkness. The air got colder as I ascended, and the unsettling smell from the basement seemed to follow me, growing stronger rather than weaker. At the top of the stairs was a hallway lined with doors. Each one was closed. Each one was locked. I tried them one by one, all locked except the last one at the far end of the hallway. The door swung open silently, revealing a room that made my blood run ice cold. It was a bedroom, but the entire interior was mirrored. Every wall, the ceiling, the floor beneath my feet was covered in mirrors, and in every reflection, I saw something terrifying. There were people standing behind me. I spun around, but the hallway behind me was empty. When I looked back at the mirrors, they were still there. Dozens of them, hundreds of them, all standing in complete silence, all staring directly at me with those same dead, empty eyes I'd seen in the photographs. The horrifying realization that the mirrors weren't just showing reflections of my surroundings, but of something else entirely, sent me stumbling backward. That's when I noticed something even more chilling. My own reflection was wrong. In the mirrors, I was smiling. A wide, unnatural smile that I wasn't actually making. My face in the reflection was pale, waxy, and completely still except for that horrible grin. The terrifying understanding that I was looking at what I would become, at the end result of whatever this place did to people, hit me with devastating clarity. I ran. I turned and sprinted down the stairs, down the hallway, down to the basement and toward the window I entered through. The creepy silence had vanished, replaced by sounds of movement throughout the house. The horrible footsteps were everywhere now, above me and around me and closing in. The fear was absolute, overwhelming, complete. My survival instinct was screaming at me to get out, to escape, to flee this place and never look back. I threw myself through the window and landed hard on the dirt outside. My car was still there, keys still in my pocket. I fumbled with the lock, got inside, and started the engine. The horrifying sensation that the house was reaching for me, trying to pull me back, was almost physical. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. The road behind me twisted and turned, and I realized something chilling. I wasn't getting further away. The distance between me and the house wasn't increasing. No matter how hard I pressed on the gas, no matter how many turns I made, when I looked in the rearview mirror, the house was still right there. Still the same distance away. The unsettling reality that I might never escape, that something about this place defied the normal rules of space and distance, was maddening. I don't know how long I drove before I saw lights. A small town, a gas station. Reality. I pulled in and stumbled inside, gasping, covered in sweat and dirt and blood from the broken window. The attendant behind the counter looked at me like I was a ghost. His face went white when I told him where I'd been. He wouldn't speak to me directly, but he did something I'll never forget. He unlocked a drawer beneath the counter and pulled out a thick folder filled with newspaper clippings. Missing persons, dozens and dozens of them, all from that area, all vanishing without a trace over the past 80 years. The oldest clippings were from 1947, the newest from just 6 months ago. Each one mentioned that the person had last been seen heading toward or near that back road. The terrifying pattern was impossible to ignore. The creepy conclusion was inescapable. People who went to that place didn't come out the same, if they came out at all. When I finally got home, I tried to file a report with the police. They listened to my story with expressions of growing disbelief. When I told them about the names on the walls, the photographs, the mirrors, they exchanged glances I knew well. The look that meant they thought I was insane. The horrifying reality was that when they sent officers to investigate, they found nothing. The house was gone. Not destroyed, not demolished, gone. Where the structure had stood, there was now empty land. Trees, overgrown grass. No sign that anything had ever been there. The back road still existed, but it led nowhere. It ended in a dense thicket that had no gaps, no way through. The unsettling knowledge that somehow the house had moved, or hidden itself, or existed in a way that defied explanation, made me doubt my own sanity. But then I started seeing them. In crowds, on the street, in restaurants, people with that same expression. That same waxy, pale quality to their skin. That same dead, empty look in their eyes. The eerie feeling that they were looking at me, studying me, taking notes on what I did, where I went, who I spoke to. The terrifying realization hit me like a sledgehammer. They weren't looking at me because they'd been to the house. They were looking at me because I had been there too. Every night, I look in the mirror and see something wrong reflected back at me. Not quite myself, almost smiling, almost empty. The chilling knowledge that whatever happened to those people in the photographs is happening to me now. Slowly, day by day, is the worst horror I could possibly imagine. The fearful certainty that soon I'll be just like them, perfectly preserved, forever smiling, forever trapped somewhere between life and death. And the most disturbing thought of all? I started to forget why that terrifies me. The nightmare is becoming my normal. The darkness is becoming comfortable. And somewhere, in some place that exists just beyond the edge of what is real, the house is still waiting. Still recording. Still collecting its names. Still watching. Story 10. House at the end of the back road. The house knew I was coming long before I saw it. And that is the part that still wakes me up screaming in the middle of the night. My name is David. I am 42 years old. And I work in real estate photography. Not the glamorous kind you see in magazines. I photograph foreclosures, abandoned properties, houses that banks need documented before they demolished or sold at auction. It is lonely work, driving through forgotten parts of America, spending hours in empty buildings that still smell like the lives that were lived there. But it pays well, and I'm good at being alone. Or at least I thought I was, until I drove out to the Hendricks property last October. The assignment came through email late on a Friday afternoon. A farmhouse in rural Oregon, about 3 hours from Portland, way out in territories so remote my GPS would be useless. The bank's message included hand-drawn directions on a scanned piece of paper, the kind of thing you don't see anymore in our digital age. That should have been my first warning. When modern technology can find a place, there is usually a reason. The directions were simple enough. Take Highway 26 east, exit at Millerton, follow Route 7 for 18 miles, then turn onto an unmarked dirt road after a burned tree stump shaped like a hand. The road would dead end at the property. 6 miles of back road through dense forest. Photograph the exterior and interior. Document any damage or hazards. Submit the report by Monday. Easy money, or so I thought. I left Portland at dawn on Saturday, wanting to reach the property with plenty of daylight for the exterior shots. The drive started normally enough. Highway traffic thinned as I moved east into logging country, where towns are 20 miles apart and cell service is a luxury. I found Millerton easily, a cluster of buildings that barely qualified as a town. A gas station, a diner, and a post office that looked like it hadn't seen customers in years. Route 7 was where things started feeling wrong. The pavement gave way to gravel after the first mile, and the forest pressed in close on both sides. Douglas firs so tall they blocked out most of the sky, their branches creating a permanent twilight even in the middle of the morning. The road twisted and turned without logic, as if it had been carved by something other than human planning. I found the burned stump at mile marker 18. It really did look like a hand, blackened fingers reaching toward the sky, and I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that it was pointing, guiding travelers towards something they shouldn't find. The unmarked dirt road beside it looked more like a trail than a driveway, barely wide enough for my truck, branches scraping both sides as I turned onto it. The directions said 6 miles. I drove for what felt like 30 minutes, my odometer clicking past 8 miles, then 9. The forest changed as I went deeper. The trees grew more twisted, their bark darkened by some kind of fungus or disease. The undergrowth died away completely, leaving bare earth covered in brown needles that looked like they'd been arranged in patterns. Spirals and symbols that my rational mind insisted were random, but my instincts recognized as intentional. Then the road ended, opening into a clearing that shouldn't exist. The house stood alone in the center, and the first thing I noticed was how wrong it looked against the landscape. Not old, not new, existing in some timeless state that defied architectural dating. 2 stories, white clapboard siding that showed no weather damage despite clearly being abandoned for years. A wraparound porch with furniture still in place, windows intact, curtains visible behind the glass, and a front door painted deep red, the only splash of color in the entire clearing. No lights, no signs of life, no vehicles or equipment, just the house, perfectly preserved, waiting in the center of that clearing like a trap ready to spring. I parked 50 feet away and sat in my truck for several minutes, studying the property through my windshield. Something felt profoundly wrong, though I couldn't articulate what. The house was too clean, too intact. Abandoned properties show damage. Weather gets in, animals nest, vandals break windows. But this house looked maintained, cared for, despite the bank's records showing it had been empty for over a decade. And then I noticed the silence. Complete, absolute silence. No birds, no insects, no wind moving through the trees. The kind of silence that only exists in places where nature has learned to stay away. I forced myself to get out of the truck. I had a job to do, and I photographed hundreds of creepy properties before. This was just another empty house. Just another assignment. I grabbed my camera bag and approached the porch, my boots crunching on gravel that sounded too loud in the oppressive quiet. The porch steps didn't creak. They should have. Wood this old always creaks, but each step remained solid and silent under my weight, as if the house didn't want to announce my arrival to whatever might be inside. The porch furniture consisted of 2 rocking chairs positioned to face each other, as if their occupants had been having a conversation. A small table between them held a coffee cup, still half full of liquid that had long since evaporated into a dark stain. The front door was unlocked. It swung open at my touch, revealing a hallway that extended into darkness despite the morning sun. I flicked on my flashlight and stepped inside, immediately hit by the smell. Not decay or mold like most abandoned houses. Something else. Cinnamon and vanilla and wood smoke, like someone had been baking bread just hours ago. The kind of smell that makes you feel safe, that reminds you of home and childhood and comfort. That scared me more than rot would have, because it meant the house was trying to welcome me, trying to make me want to stay. The interior was fully furnished, not just furnished, but lived in. A coat hung on the rack by the door, shoes lined up underneath, mail stacked on a side table, addressed to a family named Hendricks at this address, postmarked from 15 years ago. I photographed everything methodically, working through my checklist, trying to ignore the growing sense that I was not alone. The living room held a couch facing a television from the 1990s. Magazines on the coffee table, open to articles half read, a blanket draped over the armrest as if someone had just gotten up moments ago. Family photos covered the mantel, a man and woman, late 30s, with 2 children. Smiling faces frozen in time, their eyes seeming to follow me as I moved through the room. The kitchen unsettled me most. Dishes in the sink, food remnants still visible despite 15 years of abandonment. A calendar on the wall stopped at October 2009, with several dates circled in red. The final date circled was October 31st Street, Halloween. Below it, someone had written in neat handwriting, "They re-coming tonight." My hands shook as I photographed the calendar. I told myself it was nothing. Just some family with a dark sense of humor, but I couldn't shake the feeling that those words were a warning, left for whoever found this place next. The stairs to the second floor stood at the back of the hallway, rising into darkness that my flashlight couldn't fully penetrate. I stood at the bottom for a long moment, every instinct screaming at me to leave, to forget the upstairs, to get in my truck and drive away. But I needed those photographs. The bank required documentation of every room. The stairs creaked, Finally, something in this house behaved normally. Each step groaned under my weight, and the sound echoed strangely, as if the house was much larger on the inside than it appeared from outside. The second-floor hallway stretched before me, doors on both sides, all closed except one at the very end. That door stood wide open, revealing darkness so complete my flashlight beam seemed to stop at the threshold, unable to penetrate whatever waited beyond. I started with the closed doors, documenting bedrooms frozen in time. The children's rooms still had toys scattered across the floors. Beds unmade, as if the occupants had just left for school. Homework on desks, half completed, waiting for students who would never return. In one room, a child's drawing lay on the floor. I picked it up, my blood running cold at the image. A house, drawn in black crayon. And around it, tall figures with no faces, dozens of them, surrounding the building. Below the drawing, in a child's handwriting, they watch us every night. I dropped the drawing and backed out of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hallway seemed longer now, the open door at the end somehow closer despite me moving away from it. And I could hear something. Breathing. Not human breathing. Something deeper, slower, with a wet quality that made my skin crawl. It came from the room at the end of the hall. I should have left then. Should have run down those stairs, jumped in my truck, and driven away from this horrifying place. But something pulled me forward. Not curiosity, not bravery, something else, a compulsion. As if the house had wrapped invisible threads around my mind and was reeling me in toward that open door. I walked down the hallway, each step requiring tremendous effort, as if I was moving through thick water. My flashlight flickered, the breathing grew louder, and I began to smell something new underneath the cinnamon and vanilla. Decay, old blood, the copper stench of violence. The room at the end of the hall was the master bedroom. King-size bed, perfectly made, dresser with photos and jewelry boxes, a window overlooking the backyard, and in the corner, barely visible in the shadows my flashlight couldn't reach, something tall and motionless. I froze in the doorway, my hand trembling so badly the flashlight beam danced across the walls. The shape in the corner didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, darker than the shadows around it, radiating a presence that was ancient and hungry and aware. Then it turned its head toward me. I didn't see a face, couldn't see any features, just a suggestion of a head rotating, and the absolute certainty that whatever this thing was, it was looking directly at me, seeing me, recognizing me, and in that moment of eye contact with something that shouldn't exist, I understood a terrible truth. The Hendricks family hadn't abandoned this house. They'd been taken, absorbed, consumed by whatever lived here, whatever had claimed this clearing in the deep forest and waited patiently for new prey to wander into its trap. The figure in the corner moved, not walking, gliding, flowing across the floor like liquid shadow, moving toward me with terrifying speed. I ran like I'd never run before, stumbling down the hallway, my camera bag bouncing against my head. Behind me, I heard doors slamming open, all the doors I carefully closed, and from each room came sounds, footsteps, multiple footsteps, things that had been waiting in those bedrooms, hiding from my camera, my flashlight, my rational investigation. They were all coming for me now. I hit the stairs at full speed, nearly falling, catching myself on the banister. The wood felt warm under my hand, almost alive, pulsing with something like a heartbeat. I let go immediately and took the stairs 3 at a time, hearing the things behind me reaching the top of the staircase. The front door stood open, morning sunlight streaming through, and I ran toward it like a drowning man swimming for the surface. I burst out onto the porch and sprinted for my truck, fumbling for my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them in the gravel. As I bent to retrieve them, I made the mistake of looking back at the house. Every window was filled with faces. The Hendricks family, pressed against the glass, their features distorted and wrong, mouths open in silent screams. And behind them, taller shapes, the things that had taken them, the things that wore their forms like puppets. I grabbed my keys, jumped in my truck, and started the engine. The tires spun in the gravel as I accelerated backward, turning around, racing down that dirt road faster than was safe. Branches whipped against my windows. The trail seemed narrower now, the forest pressing closer, trying to trap me. I drove for what felt like hours, my speedometer buried, expecting at any moment to dead end against a wall of trees or find the road had vanished completely. But finally, impossibly, I burst out onto Route 7. Real pavement, real world, the afternoon sun breaking through the trees. I didn't stop until I reached Portland. Didn't slow down. Didn't look in my rearview mirror because I was terrified of what I might see following me. When I finally pulled into my driveway, my hands were still shaking. My shirt was soaked with sweat, and my camera bag sat in the passenger seat, filled with photographs I knew I could never submit. I went inside, locked every door and window, and sat in my living room for hours, just breathing, convincing myself I was safe. Eventually, I worked up the courage to review the photos on my camera. The interior shots were there, the furniture, the calendar, the children, his drawings. But something was wrong with every image. In the background of each photograph, barely visible, were figures. Tall, dark shapes that I hadn't seen while taking the pictures. And in every shot, they were closer to where I'd been standing. Moving toward me, hunting me. The final photograph, the one I accidentally triggered while running down the stairs, showed the view behind me. The hallway at the top of the stairs, and filling that hallway, their distorted faces clear in the camera flash, were dozens of them. The things that lived in that house. The things that collected people and wore their skins and waited for the next victim to photograph. I deleted every image, destroyed the memory card, sent an email to the bank claiming the property was inaccessible due to road conditions and I couldn't complete the assignment. They accepted it without question, probably relieved not to deal with that cursed place. That was 6 months ago. I still work in real estate photography, but I turned down any assignments in rural Oregon. Any properties that require hand-drawn directions. Any houses that banks seem strangely eager to document without visiting themselves. Because I understand now that some houses are abandoned. They rehunting, waiting at the end of unmarked roads for people like me, professionals who pride themselves on being alone, on not being afraid of empty buildings. The house at the end of that back road is still there, still perfect and preserved and hungry. And I wonder how many other photographers, how many inspectors and appraisers and curious teenagers have driven down that dirt road. How many made it back out? The truly horrifying part is this. A month after my visit, I was contacted by a different bank about another foreclosure photography job. Different property, different location. But when I opened the email attachment with the directions, my blood turned to ice. It was the same house, the same address, the same hand-drawn map. But this time, the property was listed under a different family name. And the directions ended with a note in handwriting I recognized from the calendar in that kitchen. Come along. We're waiting. I didn't take that job. I'll never take that job. But I know the house is still out there, still sending out its invitations to banks and real estate companies, still luring people down that back road. And I know that somewhere in those perfect bedrooms frozen in time, my photograph has been added to the collection on the mantle. My smiling face, forever trapped in that house at the end of the back road, waiting for the next visitor who thinks they're just there to take pictures.